Yonda Pravishamama Vachamam Prasuptam Sanjeev Klesittara Sudhavna Anyam Shavastacharana Shanatavadi Pranam Bhute Purushayata. The Spirit, the Supreme Reality, is the immanent and omnipresent principle pervading the entire universe. Om peace, peace, peace. Yoga as a way of life was the subjects that we have been dealing with last time. Last time I dealt with some of the important general and specific disciplines like non-violence, purity, contentment, steadfastness, devotion, concentration, and so on. Today I shall deal with one specific aspect of yoga. Here we have to remember, as I mentioned last time, by yoga we mean a way of life, an approach to life. On the one hand, it helps us to bring out all our own inner resources, mental, intellectual, spiritual, all resources, all the potential that are lying within could be brought out through yoga. On the other hand, it helps us to look at the entire humanity as one spiritual family. So on the one hand, it gives us inner peace, happiness, and contentment. On the other hand, it develops in our mind a very healthy, harmonious, brotherly attitude towards the entire creation. Not only human beings, everything in this world is experienced to be an expression of the Supreme Consciousness. Now, yoga is generally divided into 4 categories. There are 4 types of yoga. It's not that all these 4 yogas are to be practiced by every individual. In fact, the great ancient sages prescribed these 4 yogas to suit the temperaments, aptitudes, and tendencies of people belonging to different categories, different characteristics. See, sometimes you find people who are by nature very active, not much given to contemplation, not much given to devotional practices or philosophization. They mostly live a very active life. For such people, the great sages prescribed one particular type of yoga, which is technically called karma yoga or yoga through action. That's the first important category, and that's also very simple. Karma yoga aims at spiritualizing or giving a spiritual orientation to all our actions, all the work we do, not only physical work, not only physical activities, but mental activities too, thinking, contemplation, all these activities, or sometimes our emotions, our ideas that flash through our mind, all these are given a spiritual orientation. This is the aim of karma yoga. Normally we know it is said in the Gita, and it is admitted by all psychologists, that you can never keep quiet for one split second. Physically we can keep quiet, we can sit When we are sleeping, we are inactive, in fact. Physically, we are inactive. But mentally, we are active. When we dream, our mind becomes very active. And even when we are sitting in an easy chair, relaxing, we know we are not active at that time in a physical sense. But we are very active, perhaps in an intellectual, psychological sense. Because when we think, when we contemplate, when thoughts emerge in our mind, we are becoming active. So it means it is impossible for anyone to remain inactive mentally and physically at the same time. Even when we are not physically active, mentally we are always active. Very often we are active both mentally and physically. Now, the next problem is, what are the actions and what are the results of these actions? It is said in the Gita and it is said in the works of the great psychologists who expounded the yoga philosophy. His name was Patanjali. He says the human character is the sum total of all thoughts, actions, deeds and words that we speak, that we think, that we do. All the actions that we do, all the words we speak, all the thoughts we think will have their effect on our character. In fact, they constitute the totality of human character. This is a very interesting and very important principle in understanding the dynamics, the mystery of Karma Yoga. You may have observed, we do certain things in a certain way. We can't help it. Sometimes, people who are well established in the ideal of truthfulness, even if they deliberately work hard, they cannot tell a lie. Even if they decide to tell a lie, it will be a truth only when they really try to speak a lie. So also people who are habitually given to speaking lies cannot speak one truth. Even if they contemplate and work hard, they cannot speak a truth. That means there are certain inherent tendencies and impressions which constitute the totality of human character. Now, according to Vedantic philosophy and according to yoga psychology, what really happens is, this character, as I said earlier, is formed and it becomes the totality, the external expression of all the thought currents that are associated with our actions. And this will take us to the mystery of the formation of human character. What we see and what we experience in this life is only tip of the iceberg. An iceberg, what is visible above the water level is only a fraction, a small part of the iceberg. Maybe 80% or 90% of the iceberg may be below the water level, which is not visible to us. Similarly, whatever we express today, whatever we understand as our character today is only a fraction of our character. The rest of the character is related to the actions that we have done, not in this life, in previous life. Because law of karma and the doctrine of rebirth, these are two important principles to be understood, to know the true nature of karma yoga. As I said earlier, in yoga psychology and Vedanta, we don't have just one life. We don't have just one existence. What we have, which we call life, is nothing but a continuation of life experiences that we had sometime in the past. And we may have had hundreds of lives in the past. So in these lives we have accumulated so many tendencies, impressions and characteristics which constitute the nature of our human character. And according to this character, we continue our actions. What we do in this life depends upon our character. And our character itself is the result of what we have done in the past. That's how it is related. It means life is, in one sense, life is one. It's an endless flow of character, actions, and these actions again influencing character, and this character again determining the kind of actions that we do. So in one sense, it is a continuous flow. But then, in another sense, life is not one. So, according to our actions, character is formed, and according to character, actions are performed. Now, generally, as I said earlier, when we perform our actions, very often we work as slaves, not as masters. We do many things which, when we go deeper, when we think later, we feel that we should not have done. Very often it happens. There is always a conflict between the lower self of mind and the higher self of mind. It is not Atman, the lower mind, the higher mind, you may call it. At one level, we want to get out of this bondage, this slavery of action. On the other hand, we cannot do that. Now, Karma Yoga tells us that karma or action which normally binds us to this world, to this chain, can itself be used as a tool to break these chains. Karma, which we normally do with a definite motive, with a strong desire, with a great attachment, and which becomes a source of bondage, can be transformed into a tool, an instrument for breaking the very chains which bind us to the world. And the great psychologists and also great scriptures like Gita tell us that when karma performed with attachment, it creates bondage, and we are forced to do work as slaves. But the same karma, when done, when performed without a selfish motive, helps us to do it as a master. So karma or action can be done as a master, and also it can be done as a slave. When we are attached, we are forced to work as slaves. When we are not attached, we can work as masters. When there is no desire, we can be free from attachment. When there is desire, we become attached to the results of the actions. So when we are attached to the results of actions, we normally do things which may not be necessary. When the results of actions are pleasant, then we may have tendency to continue doing the same work, even if it is not needed. So we become slave. We are enslaved by this desire. On the other hand, if we are detached, non-attached to the results of actions, then we can work, but we can work as masters. Vivekananda tells us that all the great spiritual personalities in the world, whether you take Jesus Christ or Buddha or Shankaracharya or Ramakrishna Order, anyone for that matter, all the great spiritual personalities who have overturned the world, who have made a permanent contributions, they made permanent contributions to the totality of human civilization. They have been great workers, but they worked without desire. They worked without perfect non-attachment. Detachment is sometimes the word used. It doesn't have a negative connotation. It means they were not attached to the results of their actions. So they could work as masters. So, a few important points to remember is we are inevitably dragged to some activity or other, either physically or mentally. There is no escape from it. Second point is, if we work with attachment and desire, we are working as slaves. If we work without attachment and desire for the results of our action, then we can work, and at the same time we can work as masters. Here question may naturally arise, can we really become efficient when we work without a strong motive, with a strong sense of attachment to the results? This question may arise. Is it possible to be efficient and effective in the area of work when we work without any desire? Great scriptures like Gita tell us that it is possible. It is not that we should be indifferent towards work. We need not be indifferent. We can be efficient. We can be enthusiastic. But when we work and when we do our duty for its own sake, then it is possible to be efficient. At the same time, it is possible to be non-attached. Some of the ancient scriptures speak of great karma yogis, being practitioners of karma yoga in ancient times. This is such people were called Rajashaya, means they were both kings and also sages. These terms are used. Great men of worth who combined in their character the attributes of a sage and also the attributes, the characteristics of a king. A king has to be active, he has to be dynamic, he has to be efficient, he has to be prompt. But generally, such people become workaholics. They work as slaves. And when you work with great anxiety, with great efficiency, with great success, with great attachment, you may work for 18 hours of the day, but then diabetes, BP, blood pressure, heart problems, anxiety neurosis, depression, melancholia, such problems arise. It's called, sometimes they call the problems of abundance. When we are industrially advanced, when we become economically successful, when we become successful in our professional life, when we work very hard as workaholics, we succeed, but then people may succeed in making money, in making wealth, but then by the time it's time for retirement, they become physically and psychologically, they are rendered incapable of enjoying the wealth and the good things that they have created through hard work. Now, is it possible to avoid these problems like anxiety, neurosis, depression and other problems associated with workaholism, and at the same time be successful in professional life? So, great texts like Gita tell us that it is possible. Combine efficiency with contemplation. That is the technique they give. Be efficient and active, but contemplate. Now, this will take us to certain other aspects, philosophical aspects. Now, we have to live in this world. We work in this world. There is no way out, because even if we choose to be, even if we try to be inactive, we are forced to work. Even if we sit quiet somewhere, mind is active. So there is no such thing as being inactive, both mentally and physically. Now, if we make an attempt to work as masters by being non-attached, then we can have all the good things of work and at the same time avoid the problems associated with workaholism. As I said earlier, anxiety, neurosis, depression and so on. What really happens when we work with great desire, great anxiety, with great application and great attachment, we are very much anxious as to what will be the results of our actions. Even when we are engaged in work, we will be always thinking about, we worrying about what will happen if I fail. A businessman may be worried about the collapse of the stock exchange. An industrialist may be worried about loss of profits. A student may be worried about getting a high grade, a low grade, and job security, and so on. All these are problems. Now, even when you are engaged in work, there is a problem, anxiety. And when you are anxious, when you are anxious due to too much attachment, we are not able to concentrate on the work we are doing it with any real effect, because a part of mental energy and power of concentration will be taken away, will be neutralized by anxiety. And then if the results are not up to expectation, disillusionment, disappointment also will come. So anxiety, neurosis at the time of doing work, depression if the results are not up to the expectations. Now, on the other hand, if we keep in our mind, I am doing my duty, I shall do to the best of my expectations, duty for duty's sake, then what happens? We are not worried, we are not anxious. So we are able to concentrate our mind more effectively on the work at hand, on the work we are doing. So naturally the work will be more effective and the results also will be much better. And then there will be no anxiety, no worry while being engaged in work, and no depression, no disappointment if the results are not up to the expectations. So what happens is, work is inevitable. There is no escape from work. If you are attached as we normally are, we are forced to work as slaves. If we are non-attached, we can work as masters. And then we can remain psychologically and physically healthy, and at the same time we will have the mental health when the results of our actions are up to the expectations. If they are not up to the expectations, we won't be disillusioned and there will be no depression. This is the practical aspect of Karma Yoga. So, the difference between an average person and an ordinary person who is always active with great attachment and desire, and a real practitioner of Karma Yoga, action without desire, the difference is only this. There is no difference with regard to application, dedication, efficiency, organization skill, any of these qualities which are necessary to be successful in the field of work. The only difference is a Karma Yogi works without any attachment, and a person who is attached always, he works with great attachment. I can give a number of examples from history of great men who worked marvelous things. You may have read about Bhagavad Gita. Perhaps it is one of the most well-known scriptures in the world. This book would not have become so popular as it has become. Bhagavad Gita became a great universal spiritual classic. It is translated into almost every language. After Bible, it is Bhagavad Gita which is translated into the maximum number of foreign languages after Bible. That shows how popular and how universal a spiritual classic it is. Now this Gita became so popular, so universally well known, because a great philosopher wrote a commentary on this book. And that philosopher's name was Shankaracharya, or Shankara sometimes. He is the exponent of the non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta, the what you call Advaita or non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta, which teaches us that reality is one, that reality is supreme consciousness, which is sometimes called Atman, which is the residing immanent principle in all living beings, which is the omnipresent, all-pervading reality, and which is the transcendental principle, which cannot be defined, which can only be experienced through meditation. When we reach a level of mystical, spiritual consciousness, we identify that this supreme consciousness is the essence of all living beings. It is the immanent reality present in everything. And this great philosopher, he wrote a commentary on Gita. Not only that, in fact, it is one of his several works. He was the one who wrote commentaries on the Upanishads and other classical works which expound the philosophy of non-dualism. And he is also the author of the most sublime devotional poetry in Sanskrit literature. And he travelled all over India 4 times. And he lived in 8th century. He was born in 778 and passed away in 810. So total 32 years he lived. And he gave a new life to Hindu philosophy, Hindu ritualism, Vedantic tradition. He is actually the creator of Advaita Vedanta philosophical structure that Vivekananda later brought to America in the last decade of 19th century. Now, this person lived only for 32 years. Mahatma Gandhi, you must have heard of Mahatma Gandhi. He himself was a great karma yogi. Mahatma Gandhi says the great Shankara combined in his life the energy resources of thousands of Napoleons. Mahatma Gandhi writes in a sentence. So just imagine, see, you have to judge the impact of a person's work not only on the effect it produces during his time, but on the succeeding generations and centuries, the effect. Today, we are talking about yoga, we are talking about Vedanta, we are talking about so many other Eastern mystical traditions. Actually, they were really expounded for the first time in authentic language by Shankaracharya. And these, in fact, he was the one who gave a new life to Hindu philosophical tradition and spiritual tradition. And he lived only for 32 years. Oh, look at Jesus Christ. His life was almost as short. Oh, look at many great men who have lived in this world. Now, Mahatma Gandhi, who judged Shankaracharya, he himself was put a question by a great disciple. His name was C.F. Andrews. He was an Englishman who used to follow Gandhiji as a shadow. He was following Gandhiji all over, wherever he went. He was a great admirer of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, Mahatma Gandhi's speciality was he used to work for almost 16 hours or 18 hours a day. And very often he used to undertake long fasting periods, 41 days, 21 days, and so on. So this great, he himself was a well scholarly person. C.F. Andrews once put a question to Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi, are you not tired? Why don't you take holidays from time to time? Then Gandhi asked the question, who is tired? I am not tired. The mystery of Gandhiji was this. When he passed away, when he was shot, he breathed his last, chanting the name of God 3 times. You may remember, Hey Ramesh. That means, whatever he did in his life, he did as an offering to God. His every action, whether he fasted, whether he worked for India's freedom struggle, when he dictated his lectures, articles, All this he did as an offering to God. So he was never tired. Gandhiji said he was never tired. Now, if anyone could work with complete detachment, looking upon every bit of his action as an offering to God, then you feel he can always be active, but he won't feel the burden of what he is doing. This is in fact a practical aspect of Karma Yoga. One of the sterling examples of Karma Yoga is Mahatma Gandhi, because he lived close to our own times and people in the West all have heard about him. So a person who was old and frail looking and who walked all over the country organizing people, and who was the prophet of the philosophy of non-violence in modern times, this person worked for 18 hours. Very often he slept only for 4 hours a day, but he was never tired. And the reason he gave was he never felt he was doing anything. Whatever he did, every action, whether his speeches, whether his deeds or his thoughts, he all offered as a flower at the feet of God. Now, those who believe in God, it is easy for them to practice Karma Yoga. The God who is omniscient, omnipotent, is compassionate, he is the creator of the universe, and who doesn't who doesn't divide mankind into believers and non-believers, who welcomes even non-believers also, who opens his doors even to non-believers. Such a God whom Gandhiji believed in. That God was his ideal. So whatever he did as an offering to God. So you find some stages, 3 stages in the evolution of this Karma Yoga. At the beginning, one can do one's duty, perform his responsibility as an offering to God. So work itself becomes a worship. You need not go to a church or a temple or any place of worship. Whatever you do, physically, mentally or intellectually, becomes a prayer. Every thought becomes a meditation. Every act becomes an act of worship. Every word becomes a prayer. This is the first stage. This itself is not easy to achieve. In fact, this is one way of sublimating all our actions. So you can be active even when you are active, when you are doing your work in the office, when you are performing the responsibilities related to your profession. All those works can be looked upon as an offering to God. So here, work as worship. This is the first stage. Whatever we do should be looked upon as an offering to God. A thought becomes an act of meditation. A word becomes an act of prayer. And a deed becomes an act of worship. So there is nothing other than worship. Now, at the next stage, this is explained by the great philosophers of Karma Yoga. This is the most higher stage. When a person reaches perfection in the practice of looking upon all his actions or her actions as an act of worship, work itself ceases to exist. Everything becomes worship alone. You need not look upon every work as worship. Worship alone exists. This is how one could completely spiritualize our whole existence. Because worship, whole human life itself becomes an act of worship. Here, of course, many problems, many doubts may arise in our mind. What about our duty, sense of responsibility? Certain things that we have to do, which apparently don't have anything, no association with spirituality or spiritual culture. Now, according to the great speakers, the great authors of Karma Yoga, when a person becomes established in Karma Yoga ideal, he never distinguishes one action from the other. Because for him everything becomes an act of worship. But the great teacher of Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna, reminds us of a very important point. For he is a word of caution to the practitioners of Karma Yoga. This non-attachment, which I referred to earlier, should not be practiced all of a sudden. Because normally people are used to working hard with a definite motive, with a plan, with some well-structured scheme or plan. Is it possible for such a person to start the practice of Karma Yoga all of a sudden? Lord Krishna makes a statement, Na buddhi vedam janayet ajnanam karma sankina. It's a very statement, translation is this. Never try to tell a person to stop doing work with attachment and start doing work with detachment. Because when we normally do our duty, as I said earlier, we have a definite plan, a motive. And then, if such a person suddenly starts, or if he tries to practice action without a definite motive, he may become indifferent and he may fail in that action. It creates a great confusion. So what happens? It should be done stage by stage. One should not practice this Karma Yoga all of a sudden. But one should keep mind familiar with this idea and try to become more and more non-attached to the results of actions. Or one should try to reduce attachment to the results of action. What happens is, if a person suddenly becomes non-attached, it can lead to some kind of laziness or indifference. Without any definite plan, if an average person starts the practice of Karma Yoga, suddenly he may think that he's practicing Karma Yoga, but his mind is not ready. His intellect is ready. He has intellectually understood the principles of Karma Yoga, but mentally that person is not ready. So slowly you should get familiar with this idea and he should keep reducing his attachment to results of these actions. If one could do that, one can combine the efficiency, the dynamism, and the zeal of a successful man of action and the calmness, the serenity of a saint. Both can be combined. Within us, we can remain calm and peaceful, tranquil. The serenity, the saintliness of a rishi or sage. But at the same time, outwardly, we can be active and dynamic. So how to combine contemplation within and action without? That's what Karma Yoga is teaching us. On the one hand, it tells us to combine action and contemplation. On the other hand, it becomes, from a psychological or psychiatric point of view, it provides you a remedy for all the problems related to anxiety, neurosis, job insecurity, depression, and other problems. So this is one thing. So I have just tried to outline some principles of Karma Yoga. After this I shall continue. But before that, I would like to invite some suggestions. If you have got any points to be discussed further, I can explain those points. I can give more elaborate explanations of some of the points which I have just hinted by class. You can suggest any points.
Something about Mr. Gandhi that I want to say. is always associated with ahimsa or non-violence. But he is also the cause of splitting India into two nations and the subsequent riots and all the killings of hundreds of thousands of people that took place. He is morally responsible and he has no claim to non-violence, absolutely.
I'll say
number 2 point about the same person. The person who shot him, his name is Godse, Nathuram Godse. And he never hid anything in his statement. He admitted doing everything. But he said, when he shot him, he just sighed and fell down. That name Rama Rama was put by the politicians around him.
Well, I tell you, here I shall answer your questions. One point is, I do believe, because I heard from different sources, including some very respectable and reliable persons whom I have no reason to disbelieve, that Gandhiji uttered the name of God Rama 3 times. You may or may not believe, that's a different matter, because this is a matter of belief. But I do believe. The first principle, the first part of the question I shall answer, because that seems to be more sensible now in this present context. Now look here, all these well-known persons, the doctrines they preached, the political ideologies they preached, may not be always acceptable to everyone. There are some people who had certain great qualities as individuals, but what they taught, some of the ideologies for which they stood, which they advocated, may have led to some unwelcome, unfortunate consequences. That is true. I am not referring to that. My subject here right now is Karma Yoga, and a very great spiritual person is a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, and himself was a great Karma Yogi. He referred to this particular aspect in Gandhiji's character. It's not non-violence. He said Gandhiji's ideas and ideologies may not be agreeable to many. I have come across many people who violently oppose Gandhism, Gandhi and Ahimsa. I am not coming to that subject because I feel this is not the right occasion for us to deal with that subject. But this particular aspect, Gandhiji, whatever he did with perfect detachment. He had no selfish motive. Absolutely nothing. That's what he could continue working for 18 hours a day, because whatever he sincerely believed and thought that whatever he did is God's work. That may not be agreeable to many. I have come across many such people. That is altogether a different subject. His concept of non-violence, etc., a different subject. But what I feel, but he could inspire many people who are themselves all over the world. But as an individual, he is taken as a classic example of action without desire, perfect unselfishness. That aspect only I wanted to refer. That is the subject of discussion right now. Other aspects are there, many. You see, 91 volumes, huge volumes. Each volume the size of Encyclopedia Britannica. You find Gandhi's complete works, 91 volumes. So many things which may be agreeable, disagreeable. That's not the subject. Any other point related to this Karma Yoga aspect, please?
I'm trying to get this straight. So it's really hard to picture being detached. And then you say that it could lead to indifference. So you can be detached and still care, but not care about the outcome? Is that...
Yeah. It's not indifference towards the results. Right? We should concentrate on the means. If we concentrate on the means, if the means, the tools, instruments are perfect, then the results will actually be good. So let us concentrate on the means. That is the idea behind Karma Yoga. So when we do the work, if we do with sincerity, with perfect concentration, and perfect concentration is possible if you are completely non-attached, because mental energies are not distracted. by anxiety and worry about the results. So naturally we'll be able to do the work more effectively. And that will take care of the result. If the means are all right, then the results cannot be wrong. That's the idea behind it. In fact, from a philosophical, logical point of view, it's difficult to convince anyone of this, because naturally we are conditioned to do things with a definite plan and motive. It's natural. But when our actions produce problems, then we think, what is the cause of these problems? Anxiety and so on. Then we find it is too much botheration, too much worry about the results of our actions. That's creating all the problems in mind. But we cannot keep quiet. We cannot be inactive, because inaction is psychologically an impossibility. Psychologically, inaction is impossible. Anyway, we have to work. Even if we don't work as masters, we will be forced to work as slaves. In fact, generally people are forced to work as slaves. When our desires, motives dictate terms to our mind, then when the senses drag our mind towards different objects of attraction, then we are naturally being enslaved by the senses. So there is no freedom. So better be detached. Detached means non-attached in that sense. Not that we should be indifferent. We should not be indifferent. It is not indifference. In fact, a perfect karma yogi, when he thinks or she thinks that whatever he does is an act of worship, we be very careful. Because when we do something very solemn, very sacred, which we consider to be very, very holy, we won't do it in an indifferent way. So we can do it with great concentration, with great solemnity and care. At the same time, mind need not worry too much about the results of actions. This is the practical aspect of karma yoga. I hope it's clear. Clear? Okay.
Yeah, I think attachment in our daily life has to do mostly with identification of form, which is impermanent.
Yeah. Identification of?
Yeah.
Identification of?
Yeah, so we are attached to things that are impermanent, which is the form.
True.
Rather than the spirit,
Yeah.
which is eternal.
Yeah.
And I think on a practical matter, how we can maybe practice to become more detached would be practicing it every day.
Yes.
A British woman, Karen Kingston, she wrote a book, Clearing Your Clutter with Feng Shui. And she says she did practicing with people. She gave them, advice about uncluttering their home. So she would go into a closet and there would be maybe 40 shirts hanging there. She would ask the owner, which are your favorite shirts? And most people would have 6 or 8 or 10 shirts that they favored and wore all over and over. The other 30 they didn't wear. Then she said, why do you even keep them? She said, what is number 11 shirt? When did you wear that one? 10, 15 years ago. So she said, why do you keep it? There's old energy attached to it. And when there's a stuck energy, once you get rid of them, donate them, give them to somebody that needs them, and you create a room or space where you will bring in positive energy. And also, I think by practicing it every day, I try to do that every day. 2 or 3 things I give away every day.
Yes.
And by the end of the year, you have almost 1,000 items. It could be a small item, a book or a shirt or a shoes or whatever. And unclutter it, and you unclutter your mind, and you unclutter your soul and your spirit too. And I think also with attachment in the Buddhist sense too, they said too, attachment is the root of all suffering.
Yes.
So if we don't want to be masochists, unless we are masochists and enjoy suffering, then be attached. But if you don't enjoy suffering, then don't be attached.
In fact, Vedanta gives a clue to
Yeah.
the psychology of non-attachment.
Yeah.
So Vedanta says, no, everything in this world other than consciousness is impermanent.
Yeah.
We normally become attached to things when we mistake them to be permanent. But really they are not permanent. Now, you care for something and you worry about something, you become mentally too much attached to something when you think that it is permanent or it could bring you permanent peace, happiness, satisfaction or anything.
Yeah.
The moment you realize that it is impermanent or whatever it produces cannot be permanent, that moment you can start practicing non-attachment. So actually, from a psychological point of view, the psychology of attachment is always related to the feeling that the objects of attachment are permanent. People, you see, so that's why in this, I mentioned earlier the Rajarshi context. I shall explain it a little further,
Yeah.
A king and a sage rolled into one. That should be our character. Now the question arises, how is it possible? A king not of modern times, king of medieval ancient times, where they are all powerful dictators, They have to be very active and they have to acquire a lot of wealth. And wealth is sometimes defined as the sign of king in ancient scriptures, because the whole kingdom belongs to him. So naturally, all the comforts, everything in the kingdom belongs to him. But along with that, he also thinks that they are permanent, so they belong to me. Then he becomes attached. But suppose a king who owns a large kingdom also realizes the fact that the kingdom and all the comforts that come along with it are all impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
They will vanish one day. Then he can practice the non-attachment of a sage. Because a saint realizes that all the kingly comforts will come to an end one day.
Mm-hmm.
But average normal king doesn't do that. But a king who is outwardly a king and inwardly a sage can combine that higher wisdom of saintliness and the dynamism of the king. That is the idea mentioned in the Gita called Rajarshi, means the king and Rishi. Rishi means sage. So both can be one. In fact, this is explained as the psychology of Karma Yoga. The Gita, there are two verses. One is the practical application. One deals with the practical application of Karma Yoga. The other deals with the psychology of Karma Yoga. So there Krishna, the Sanskrit verse is this, so I explain in English, Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tektva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samattum yoga uchyate. This verse describes the psychology of Karma Yoga. So here the teacher Krishna tells, do all your duty, but be established in yoga. Mm-hmm. Yoga stands for complete non-attachment. And when you are completely non-attached or detached to the results of your actions, you really can leave the results to themselves. You need not worry about them. So the literal translation of the verse is, you need not worry about the positive or negative results of your actions. But do your duty with all concentration, with all efficiency, with all organization skill, but mentally remain detached. Even if you think you cannot do that, this is the only solution to the problems of modern world. That is where it becomes relevant. We may think it is impossible, but an attempt to practice this is perhaps the only solution to the problems of modern world, with all the workaholism and all the insecurity and all these problems, which create a lot of tension, anxiety, internal void, emptiness and all that. And the second part is, see, buddhi yukto jahadiha ube sugura duskure tasma yoga yujyasa yoga karmasu kaushala. I shall explain this. The verse I quoted because it's being recorded, some people may be able to make use of. It comes in the second chapter of the Gita, 48, 49, 50, that verse. Now, the second sloka, the second verse in the Gita tells us, see, yoga karmasu kausalam. Yoga is being defined here. Efficiency in action is the essence of yoga. This is the translation. Efficiency in action. What is the efficiency? Efficiency is this. Normally, whatever we do, physical action or mental action or verbal action, it creates problems. It creates some tendencies in our mind. If our actions produce pleasant result, we will have a tendency to do it even when it is not necessary. And when an action produces unpleasant result, we will have a tendency to avoid it even if it is essential. So in both ways, karma produces an unhealthy impact on the mind. So samatva means perfect equanimity. Mind should be kept stable in perfect equanimity. We need not worry about. If the results are beyond expectations, don't be jubilant. That should not create any kind of jubilation. Should not feel overjoyed. Because all the empirical things which you mentioned, impermanent things, have two sides. Grief or misery and happiness. The one speciality of anything that is empirical. So is it money? Now, when suppose a person works hard for money, before he got money, he had unhappiness. When he gets money, when he had already got money, he will be anxious. If what will happen if I lose the money? Then also it is unhappiness. And when he loses the money, then also is unhappiness. So just imagine. So anything related to empirical world, impermanent things, is also inseparably related to unhappiness. Before you got that object which gives you happiness, you are unhappy. When you have already acquired it, then also you will be anxious not to lose it. You will be too much worried about it. And when you lose it, then also there will be unhappiness. If you don't lose it still, so long as it is with you, you will be anxious. Yeah. So, unhappiness is inseparable to anything that gives you impermanent, momentary enjoyment. Now, there is a way beyond this. Gita tells us that there is a higher level. If you want permanent happiness, you should avoid going for happiness. If you want permanent happiness, don't seek happiness. Then you reach a point, your level of contentment, which goes beyond happiness and unhappiness. Because everything related to empirical world, empirical phenomena, has got on one side it is happiness, on the other side grief. Momentary, which are one. You can't have a coin with only one side. A coin will have two sides. But if you want permanent happiness, there is only one way. Stop seeking happiness. That is permanent happiness. That real happiness, capital letter H.
I think it's like living in the moment. That is really, and finding our inner peace.
Yes, that is Buddhist way of meditation.
Yeah, we always look to the future, or yes. we look at the past, or yes. we look in the future. What something better will happen, yes. but the better will happen right now.
Really, yeah. Really, in Vedanta, in Vedanta philosophy, yeah. The only supreme absolute reality is consciousness, or Atman, or Brahman is called. It is beyond time. Uh-huh. It always existed. It always exists. It will always exist. So, it is beyond time. Now, whatever belongs to time is relative. When you spoke about eternal presence, it is called the eternal present. In Buddhist philosophy, it's called eternal present. See, the past also you experienced only as a form of present. The future also you will experience only as present. In fact, there is neither past nor future. Why? You are talking about past, but the past was only present when you really experienced it. And you are talking about future. The future you will never experience your future. The future, when you experience it, will be present only. That means only present exists. And if only present exists, then why do you call it present? The moment you call it present, then because present is a relative term, and it becomes meaningful only in relation to past and future. So present is one reality which goes beyond all time. So it is, in Vedanta it is called the consciousness, which beyond time, which beyond time and beyond any kind of changes. So living at present means be always aware of this consciousness. So present is a term that we use. I'm just logically I was analyzing. So there is no present even. There is only the reality. That's the idea behind. Now, as you see your question, coming back to your earlier question, eternal happiness. The Gita says, Sukham atindriyam yettat buddhigrahim atindriyam. The absolute happiness, the transcendental happiness, which is called contentment, goes beyond the senses. When we seek something and when we get it, we feel satisfaction. But that is at the level of the senses and mind. That state of happiness will vanish when we lose it, as I said earlier. Now, there is a transcendental happiness, and no empirical thing can give you that transcendental happiness. It is an inner experience. The transcendental happiness, the permanent happiness, is an inner experience. And that is possible only when you identify yourself to be that consciousness, which is beyond everything. And when you get a flash of this experience, you feel within, well, I have got something beyond which I cannot get anything. There is nothing beyond this. It's an inner feeling. It is called contentment. Contentment. That's what everyone is seeking. The only problem is people are seeking this contentment at the empirical level. And it is impossible to get this contentment at the empirical level. So, this is the transcendental happiness, the supreme happiness, which is called contentment. When we feel that, when we experience it, we feel that there is nothing beyond this that I can aim at, that I can seek for, that I should seek for.
Could it be said that when we find our inner peace, then all our desires will dissipate? Because when we have our inner peace, we don't need anything else.
Yes, yes. This contentment is inner peace.
Yeah.
This contentment is inner peace.
Yeah.
See, when we experience that peace, we won't have any desire for the empirical phenomena, empirical objects. That's called contentment, the inner contentment. It is something intuitive. And that is what is called the mystical experience by Christian mystics, the medieval ages. And it is called nirvana in Buddhist tradition. It is called maybe Christian marriage in Christian mystical tradition, experience. And it is called the identity of individual soul and the universal soul, Jiva, Brahma, Aikya in Vedantic philosophy, and so on. It is called different names, but actually it is beyond names. It is a matter of experience. Names are only attempts to explain something which cannot be explained. And this is what is called the inner contentment or the transcendental happiness, which is not really happiness, so it's called transcendental happiness, it's called. If we can develop this, then even if our work doesn't produce the expected result, we won't be shaken. So that's why Lord Krishna in the Gita defines the psychology of yoga as mental equanimity. And then efficiency. So what he means by efficiency is this, Normally, as I said earlier, when we work as slaves, when we work with a strong desire in the mind, with a strong attachment, we are bound to our senses. We are bound to worldly pleasures. So there is a strong chain. Even when we are attached to pleasant experiences, it is also bondage. The chain is made of gold, that's all. If we are trapped in unpleasant experiences, the chain is made of steel or iron. Even when we are attached to pleasant experiences, the chain is made of gold. But still it is prison only. It is only bondage. Now, there is only one way to break this chain. And Krishna tells us perfect mental equanimity. So he defines yoga in one word. The Sanskrit word, and this Tvam Yoga Uchide. This yoga is perfect. The experience of identity between individual soul and universal soul in Vedanta, and it is called different names in different traditions. And this goes beyond all religions. This experience is not confined to any religious tradition. It goes beyond all. When we get out of the prison walls of organized ritualistic belief systems, and when we go in search of the supreme truth, we get this experience. Such great men are called mystics, or men of spiritual experience.
Joseph Campbell, in his book The Power of Myth, he studied throughout his lifetime all the mythologies and all the different religions. And he says people are so attached to the symbols that they miss the message.
It often happens.
And people are fighting when they have all the fighting going on between different religions.
Yes.
They're fighting over the symbols. They really basically believe in the same thing.
That's right.
So it's attachment to symbolism.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, attachment takes place only at the level of symbols. Every religion, every spiritual tradition has 4 levels.
Yeah.
The grossest, most primitive, the kindergarten level, is the level of symbols and rituals.
Yeah.
Symbols and rituals.
Yeah.
Any kind of symbol and rituals. And there can be no unity. There is nothing spiritual, there is nothing mystical or transcendental in symbols and rituals. Beyond that, there is mythology. It is also related to this. At the 3rd level, philosophy. At the philosophical level, there could be some parallelisms in between different religious or spiritual faith systems. But there will be perfect unity and harmony only when we go beyond all this and reach the level of experience. So, experience is ultimately the criterion of spiritual unfoldment or spiritual enlightenment. And this experience is nothing but that contentment that we were speaking about earlier, the transcendental happiness or contentment. Any questions from? Thank you. You made this session very lively by introducing new topics for discussion. Any?
With karma yoga, is there also the idea of the absence of doership?
Absence of?
Doership?
Oh, yes. Absence of doership, no? Yes. See, when we, of course, this is related to, karma yoga. I have to make a few introductory remarks. Karma yoga it has got one special feature. It could be practiced even by people who don't believe in God. That's one special feature of Karma Yoga. Other yogas are related to believe in some transcendental reality. But Karma Yoga can be practiced by anyone who has got a strong moral conviction and a desire to lead a good life. That is a special feature of Karma Yoga. That's why Buddha is fundamental principles like the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths and all, which are high moral ideas. Now, those who believe in God can practice Karma Yoga thinking that God is the doer and we are not the doers. The agentship of action is transferred to a higher reality, God in whom you believe. It makes Karma Yoga, the practice of Karma Yoga, easy for a practitioner. Now, those who do not believe in any such God, they can say, well, I am doing this duty because it is my sacred duty. That's right. So, duty for duty's sake can be practiced by those who do not believe in God. Like Buddha. Buddha didn't have anything. Trishna, as you call desire, is the cause of bondage. And Trishna, and getting out of Trishna or desire, you can reach Nirvana. That is Buddha's teaching. Now, even if a person doesn't believe in any transcendental principle or ideal can practice Karma Yoga by through the conviction that, well, I'm not a doer. I don't have anything to do in this. I'm just doing my duty and responsibility. Either you can say God is doing everything, and not I. That makes things very easy. I'm only an instrument in the hands of God. I'm doing all this. I'm not doing all. I'm only an instrument in the hands of God. That makes the practice of Karma Yoga very easy. Otherwise, well, I don't have any selfish motive to be achieved. I'm just doing my duty. That's all. So both is possible. But the agentship or the doership should be with. That's the first important principle of Karma Yoga. When you don't have any selfish motive or selfish desire, then it is easy to practice all actions without feeling that we are doing anything. We are just instruments in the hands of God. Or we are doing our duty for duty's sake. Both are possible.
And when you say God, can we also, is that synonymous with consciousness?
Excuse me?
Consciousness?
Excuse me?
When you say God, is that synonymous with
yes.
with God consciousness or divine consciousness? Because when you say it, sounds
yes.
like anthropomorphic.
Normally when we use the word God, we mean a God who is compassionate, who is merciful, who is present in everything in this world, and who is who looks after the entire creation. That's our idea behind. That is according to non-Advaitic schools of Vedanta, like Ramanuja, Madhva, Abrahamic religions, and all these religions. God has got a definition for that. There have been great practitioners of Karma Yoga during Middle Ages in many Christian mystical traditions who didn't have any selfish motive. They surrendered their actions and their life, everything to Christ, Jesus Christ. Such people, great men have been there. So for them it is easy. That's the idea. But then those who have realized the highest spiritual wisdom through Advaita, through non-dualistic system of philosophy, cannot do anything with a selfish motive. They become habitual performers of Karma Yoga. Those who have reached a very high level of spiritual enlightenment habitually, instinctively practice Karma Yoga. So, for the beginners, they should try to practice by reducing their attachment to the results of actions. For those who have reached the highest level of spiritual unfoldment, karma yoga or action without desire becomes natural and instinctive. They cannot do anything with a selfish motive. From this, anything you can ask.
Can the work be done as a service to humanity?
Yes, that's what that said. In fact, those who do not believe in God, they start practicing. One example, as I said, Buddha is an example. Buddha, Vardhamana Mahavira, maybe Confucius, and many of the great world teachers who did so much for the good of others. They're examples. Gita, Karmaneva samsiddhim astida janakadeka. There's a verse which says, great kings like Janaka in ancient times practiced this karma yoga. So, it can be done as an act of service to world at large. Here one point is, even after reaching the highest level of spiritual unfoldment, great mystics, great sages have no selfish motive. Still they continue working. Why? For the good of others. That's why I said earlier, they instinctively work for the good of others. They have nothing to achieve for themselves. That's all.
Yeah, the term God or goddess or whatever, this comes from ancient times when people practice all kinds of paganistic religions, and I think it was a symbol for a lot of people who were illiterate. They pictured maybe some old man with a beard sitting on the throne somewhere in heaven or whatever.
Yes.
But I really think for spiritual enlightenment it is totally irrelevant whether one believes in God or not. I mean, it's a great. I think the Native Americans had a good terminology. I liked it. The great mystery. And there are certain mysteries we don't even want to attempt to find out. Yeah. We just leave them as that.
That's true. No, that's true. Now, one could be religious without being spiritual.
Yeah.
And one could be spiritual without being religious.
Yeah.
There have been many great, outstanding spiritual personalities in the world who are not believers, who didn't belong to any religious faith systems. Yeah. And many people who belong to different faith systems have been totally unspiritual.
Yeah.
Such examples are there. But spirituality goes beyond religions.
Yeah.
See, remember, from an anthropological or historical point of view, religion always implies 4 aspects. See, 1, a revealed scripture. 2, a place of worship. 3, an intermediary between you and God. And then, belief in a creator God. See, most monotheistic religions are confined to these 4 aspects. Mm-hmm. Now, true spirituality goes beyond all this. Spirituality doesn't contradict this, goes beyond this. See, there have been great spiritual personalities who believed in God, who belong to different religious traditions. Just that there have been great spiritual personalities who did not believe in any religious faith systems. You have the examples for both, I believe. There have been great outstanding spiritual personalities who did belong to different religious faith systems and believed in God. No doubt about it. So the other way also. There have been great spiritual men who did not belong to any religious traditions. So what I want to tell you is, in Vedantic tradition, God is not necessarily a creator God. In Vedantic tradition, the absolute reality is beyond definition. But all scriptures try to explain, and they also admit that this reality cannot be explained. Then how do they explain it? They say, this reality is immanent in all beings. It is omnipresent, all-pervading. It is also transcendent. The belief in a personal God with certain personal attributes who creates his world on a particular day with a definite purpose and who imposes on humanity certain do's and don'ts, who divides mankind into believers and unbelievers, that kind of God does not exist in Vedantic tradition or yoga tradition.
Mm-hmm.
In yoga and Vedantic tradition, the idea of God is not confined to any religious faith systems. It's a universal spiritual reality. Universal spiritual reality. See, immanent, omnipresent, omniscient, and also transcendent. In fact, it doesn't belong to any particular religious tradition. God doesn't ask you to believe in Him. See, if a God asks you that you should believe in Him, then you don't have a very high opinion about that God who cannot exist without somebody believing Him. So Vedanta, the highest principle, the highest idea of the absolute reality is an immanent principle. We are by our nature divine.
Mm-hmm.
When we get rid of this selfishness, when we get rid of all these negative aspects, then we realize our true nature, the immanent reality within.
Mm-hmm.
That is the purpose of Vedantic tradition. And that reality is omnipresent. So, when we realize that truth, we realize that we are that reality. So, all scriptures, all spiritual practices are only attempts to uncover this true nature of ours.
Yes,
Within.
yes.
It is a spiritual practice, a kind of homecoming. Now we think we are this body, this mind, this intellect, the mechanism, psychophysical mechanisms with 5 senses, etc. and so on.
Mm-hmm.
When we realize the supreme truth, we are the immanent, omnipresent, transcendental reality,
Yeah.
then we uncover, rediscover our true nature. It is not an invention, it is a rediscovery, a kind of homecoming. We recognize what we really are. That is the psychology of the highest spiritual enlightenment in Vedanta.
Yeah.
I think we have already reached the end of our time. So we will continue this class next Saturday. And I believe this interaction seems to be much more effective. So every class I shall speak for about 45 minutes and then we will have active discussions. You can return with the questions. Your oppositions are welcome.
Yeah.
Objections are welcome. Different opinions are welcome.
Isn't it? I think it was attributed to Krishna, if I'm correct, but he made a quote. He said, "When we are born through nature, and then through conditioning, we are mostly conditioned nature.
Yes,
and
we are
towards the end
conditioned.
of our lives, we want to find our true nature again
Yes.
that we lost during.
If you decondition yourself, we rediscover ourselves.
Yeah.
Deconditioning is required.
Yeah.
Deprogramming is required.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that all of you responded with great enthusiasm. So all of you return next week
Yeah.
with more ideas so we can share and others also will be benefited. Thank you.
Well,
Namaskar.
thank you.